Stella here. Today I'm gonna talk about post-rock. Post-rock is a form of experimental rock that doesn't follow traditional song structures, chords, or riff, but instead focuses on exploring textures and timbre. As post-rock is a kind of vague umbrella term, so I'm gonna explain a little bit more here. Unconventional song structure, long instrumental passages, elements of ambience, electronica, krautrock, jazz, or even classical, atmospheric storytelling. Okay, class finished. You can go home and play video games now. Honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of the term myself, so I apologize in advance regarding how many times I'm going to say post-rock in this video. The essence of post-rock is experimental. For example, the destructive instrumental passages of the 60s Texas experimental rock band Red Crayola. And the Velvet Underground's minimalist drone rock.
How could it be the police? They come and take me for a ride.
Another 60s New York underground band, Silver Apples, whose use of pulsing rhythms and electronic melodies would predate the German krautrock group, Can, and post-rock act Stereolab.
I have known love, and love is one, and I have learned.
In the 70s, the German krautrock band, Neu, pioneered the motoric beat, a minimalist 4/4 beat that has a hypnotic forward flowing. Krautrock experimentation with rhythms and minimalist melodies have a great influence on David Bowie, Stereolab, Tortoise, and Mogwai. In 1975, Brian Eno released a minimalist instrumental album, Another Green Wood, experimenting with ambient sound textures and unusual song structure. Also, David Bowie's album Low. In 1979, the English experimental rock band This Hit released their self-titled debut, which would shape the post-punk and post-rock in the decades to come. In 1988, the commercially successful British synth-pop new wave band Talk released their fourth studio album, Spirit of Eden. Mark Hollis of Talk took inspiration from jazz musicians such as Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and incorporated elements of classical, dub, and ambient, creating an artsy album where silence serves as an instrument, yet with no short of emotional intensity. Some argue that Spirit of Eden represents the beginning of post-rock. The telltale marks of the genre, textural guitars, glacial tempos, and emphasis on dynamics, electronica, ambience, and minimalism were all in place and paved the way for bands like Sigur Rós, Mogwai, Godspeed You Black Emperor, and later period Radiohead. In 1991, Talk released their final studio album, Laughingstock, same year as another important post-rock album, Spiderland from Slint. Compared to Spirit of Eden, Laughingstock pushed the boundary even further, an album where poetic musings, anguish, and experimentation meet, creating a cohesive environment that is more than the sum of its sounds. Talk has also influenced Bach's Psychosis, Radiohead, and NA3. In the early 90s, the British independent label 2PO Records was home to several eccentric, experimental, or you can say early post-rock bands such as Pran, Stereolab, Moonshake, Seaview, and Leica. Formed in 1990 in London, UK, Stereolab are influenced by krautrock, Sigur Rós, lounge music, and 60s pop, and often feature a repetitive motoric beat with vintage electronic keyboards and synthesizers. Stereolab are vintage and avant-garde, retro and futurist at the same time. The female vocalist, Laetitia Saja, is French. Sometimes she sings in English, et parfois elle chante en français. Stereolab discography is a whole wondrous world to explore. If you haven't heard them much, definitely check it out. Seaview, a band ahead of their time, fusing guitar-based shoegaze with ambient techno, as if My Bloody Valentine met Aphex Twin. Another early British post-rock band that I really like are Disco Inferno, who describe themselves as a virtual reality band. Influenced by the American hip-hop group Public Enemy's use of sampling, Disco Inferno developed an electronic sample-based style. Sample sounds like running water, children's voices, or even car crashes.
Maybe just don't stray too far. Focus on your own. These people wanting change.
In the early 90s, Disco Inferno relied heavily on samples, studio techniques, and the potential of technology, which is also a trend of modern post-rock. In 1994, the English band Psychosis released a similar post-rock album, Hex. Hex features melancholic acoustic instrumentation with whispered vocals, creating a pensive nocturnal atmosphere. Evoking emotions by exploring textures. In the same year, the British music journalist Simon Reynolds reviewed the album Hex on Mojo magazine, using the term post-rock to describe the music of Psychosis. Later on, Simon Reynolds wrote an article on Melody Maker, further explaining the term post-rock. Post-rock bands use rock instrumentation for non-rock ends. Guitar is deployed not to generate riffs, but as a source of timbres, drums, effects-treated textures. Post-rock is music that happens along the vertical, as opposed to horizontal. Music that opens up space, as opposed to developing through time. Overall, in Simon Reynolds' definition, the spirit of post-rock is rooted in Phil Spector, Steve Reich, and Brian Eno, the kind of musicians who like to experiment with textured soundscapes, as opposed to the kind of hot rock live band like the Rolling Stones. In the late 80s and early 90s, Louisville, Kentucky, in America, witnessed a vibrant post-hardcore, post-rock, and math rock scene. The most famous band among the scene are Slint, who released the influential post-rock math rock album Spiderland in 1991. Spiderland features harmonic dissonance and irregular song structures. The vocals alternate between spoken word, singing, and shouting, with the overall unsettling, alienated atmosphere.
I'm sorry. I miss you.
The soft, loud, stop-start dynamics could also be heard in Mogwai later on. Netherlands is considered a major influence on Mogwai, Godspeed You Black Emperor, ISIS, and Explosions in the Sky. The Louisville post-rock bands were socially connected and often have repetitive band members, for example, bands like Rodin, The Full Carnation, Junior 44, and Rachel's. In the 90s, Chicago played an important role in post-rock and experimental instrumental rock in general. Tortoise, formed in 1990 in Chicago, are the primary force of the Chicago post-rock, incorporating krautrock, jazz, dub, and classical minimalism into their music. In 1996, Tortoise released their second studio album, Millions Now Living Will Never Die. The album starts with a 20-minute long song, DJ'd. Tortoise are progressive as dismissing rock traditions and let their creativity fly. Also, they are very skilled musicians. There is a meticulous, technical precision in their music. The other 90s Chicago post-rock bands are Gaster Del Sol, Isotope 217, and a band that I like a lot personally, The Sea and Cake. All I want is the sea and cake. The Canadian record label, Constellation Records from Montreal, includes several essential post-rock bands, for example, Godspeed You Black Emperor, Do You May Say Think, Fly Pan An, and the Mt.Zion Memorial Orchestra. Formed in Montreal, Quebec in 1994, Godspeed You Black Emperor are one of the most iconic post-rock bands. Their debut album, F-sharp, A-sharp, Infinity, from 1997, instantly gathered a cult fan base. Their songs are often 20 minutes long, similar to film school storytelling, with spoken word monologue,
The skyline was beautiful on fire.
field recordings, build-ups, and apocalyptic climax. Sometimes they hear like something you will hear in Ennio Morricone's Western movies, the kind of epic, desolate crying tales. In 2000s, Godspeed You Black Emperor released the famous post-rock album, Lift Your Skinny Face Like Attend Us to Heaven. I remember I recognized this album cover, I think before I ever actually listened to it. In the music of Godspeed You Black Emperor, the uneasy paranoia of the world collapsing around you is omnipresent, translating into stripping, devastating instrumentals. Honestly, I didn't really understand Godspeed You Black Emperor's music, maybe even upon fifth listen. I found that I had to listen to them very carefully, otherwise they just become kind of like a background music. They are very theatrical and kind of methodical in structure as well. But if you do listen to them carefully, they might not sound like anything you have ever listened to before. Hailing from Reykjavik, Iceland, Sigur Rós are not only an essential and influential post-rock band, but also highly recognizable. In 1999, Sigur Rós released their second studio album, Oleksandr, an album of spiritual grandeur, pristine soundscape, and soul-healing power. The vocalist Yongzi sometimes sing a language that he named as Hopelandic, making their music even more otherworldly and mythical. Strings, horns, choir, they sound massive. Sigur Rós reminds you of the vast, breathtaking Icelandic landscape. Nordic folk tales. They are the best advertisements of Iceland. Formed in 1995 in Glasgow, Scotland, Mogwai are one of the very representative post-rock bands nowadays. Influenced by Noi, My Bloody Valentine, Coding and Slint, Mogwai has kept evolving their sound throughout their career. In 1987, Mogwai released a debut album, Young Teen, an album that I used to listen to 724. It's hard to explain why I like this album. I think the usual stellar explanation is, of course, melancholy. The album starts with the track, Yes, I Am a Long Way From Home. And I remember I was listening to it once when I was a long way from home in Norway, which is also where I got this record. The climax in this song is just so gorgeous and emotional. One song from this album has become an iconic work in Mogwai's discography and post-rock in general, which is called Mogwai Fears Satan. I have always liked the song title Mogwai Fears Satan. Supposedly, I think Mogwai comes from the Chinese word Mogwai, which literally means monster or devil. So, are you a Mogwai? And do you fear Satan? The second half of the song is driven by food, fading into mystery and ethereality. In 1996, the American experimental rock band Swarms released the album Soundtracks for the Blind, a dark, eclectic album which later became a post-rock classic. Dirty 3, an Australian instrumental trio that makes startling powerful sounds out of the combination of guitar, drums, and violin. There were also Cul-de-sac, Shenzhen, La Bradford, Don Caballero, Matcha, etc. If there's any post-rock band from the last century that you like and I didn't mention, please comment down below. Into the 21st century, post-rock bands like Explosions in the Sky, 65 Days of Static, Guardians and Astronauts, This Will Destroy You, Caspian, Maybe She Will, and others have emerged. In 2003, Explosions in the Sky released the post-rock staple album, The Earth Is Not a Cold Dead Place. This album features bright guitar tone, thoughtful build-ups, beautiful melodies, and bittersweet crescendos. The Earth Is Not a Cold Dead Place has also inspired many later post-rock bands, and similar style could be heard in many. On the internet, there is a word called crescendocore, describing albums like The Earth Is Not a Cold Dead Place. It's like describing the kind of songs that usually starts gently and then gradually build up, and then eventually leading to intensive crescendos. A lot of people's impression of post-rock is mostly from the 21st century post-rock bands, which is a little bit different from Simon Reynolds' original definition of post-rock. Simon Reynolds once called crescendocore as high drama instrumental rock. I'm not saying it as a negative thing, by the way. I think it's kind of natural that a trend or a genre kind of just evolve itself with time. A lot of the famous post-rock bands also really don't like being associated with the term post-rock, as it could become restricting and their music is much more than that. Occasionally, post-metal bands with darker, heavier sounds are also associated with post-rock. For example, bands like Boris, Isis, Alcest, Jesu, Pelican, and Russian Circles. Because post-rock is again a relatively vague term, and being largely instrumental means that the language or even cultural context doesn't really matter too much. There are seriously so many bands in the world could be described as post-rock. Because I'm from Asia, so I'm gonna mention a few Asian post-rock bands here. In Japan, there are Mono, Was and Girlfriend, Downy, and Jizu. In China and Taiwan, there are Wang Wen, Sugar Plum Fairy, Sparrow, Zhao Ze. Okay, I think that's about this video. And if you like this video, please give a like button down below. And you're also welcome to share your thoughts in the comment section down below as well. Yeah, subscribe if you want to. From the last couple of videos, I got some comments regarding how music taxonomy is unnecessary. Like, if you like a certain band or song, you just listen to it. Doesn't really matter what kind of genre is that. Actually, I can entirely understand the sentiment, but I also think that music category can help people discover new music. And if anyone knows some new stuff from my videos, I think that'd be great.